Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a menace to society.
Then so shall you be.
Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Welcome back to A Menace to Society. I am so stoked to speak with today's return guest. She has a PhD. She was a gender consultant for the United Nations, and she's also worked with the Asia Foundation, and now she's currently in Washington, D.C. Please welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Lori Handerhan.
Hey, Lisa. How are you? Thanks for having me back.
I'm okay. How are you? And thanks for coming back.
Well, I'm feeling a little bit optimistic this week with all the media attention on holding elite child sex predators accountable. It looks like maybe things are starting to move in America. What do you think?
It's looking good. I noticed that you were on Twitter talking about how you used to work for Senator Mitchell.
Did, yes. I sent a tweet to this brilliant journalist who has to win the Pulitzer. You know, we all love her, Julie Brown from the Miami Herald, hoping that I could get her attention, focused on the name of former U.S. Senator George Mitchell, who was Majority Leader, Democratic Party. I interned for him, but I was paid, so it is considered work. When I was in college, I interned for him here in D.C. He was absolutely my hero. I thought he was an amazing human being, and I thought that the politicians and the politics in Maine were one of integrity, and that I was proud to be from Maine, and I couldn't have been more wrong. So I tweeted Julie Brown, I was hoping that, we can finally get some attention on this child sex trafficking ring that has been run by government employees in Maine for decades. And many, many people have come out publicly and tried to get the feds to investigate. And so far, the FBI has been totally absent, away without leave, refusing to investigate. And the Justice Department has also turned a blind eye to the massive corruption of public officials in Maine and racketeering in Maine that is going on. And part of that is child sex trafficking. There have been former child protection senior caseworkers who have come out. I tweeted out an old clip from the Bangor News in Maine, Bangor, Maine, where a former child protection worker named Cynthia Wellman, who is an absolute hero, she said that she had been harassed at work and they fired her because she tried to protect children who were being trafficked in this child sex trafficking ring that included professors at the University of Maine and judges and prosecutors and police. And after she got fired, she sued the state. She had the enormous courage to sue the state of Maine. And Bangor Daily News did an article on this lawsuit, which of course a judge dismissed. But the headline is Former Caseworker Sues DHS. Suit claims cover-up of child porn ring in Maine. And, this is old news. This has been going on in the state of Maine for a long time. This is from 1985.
Oh, my gosh.
And nothing was ever done. Her life was pretty much destroyed. I also tweeted out a news article in the Old Town Orono Times, a newspaper in Orono, Maine, from 1991, and the headline is Children Who Accused Harrington Also Named Senator Cohen. That was U.S. Senator Bill Cohen, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of Defense. And the headline, and this is a total of 180 were accused in 1987, but the names were kept secret. And this includes Senator Bill Cohen, but that was all covered up at the time. And the person who was in charge was the police chief for the state of Maine, named Demers, and he has just been sentenced for molesting and sexually abusing his own 4-year-old granddaughter.
Okay, so we got a guy who's been molesting his own granddaughter who's a judge or a police?
No, he was the chief of the Maine State Police, and he was, quote-unquote, a legendary state trooper, and he was the police chief when Senator Bill Cohen had been named by children for molesting them, and Cynthia Wellman from Child Protection in Maine was coming out saying there's a child sex trafficking ring of Maine government employees going on. So it was Andrew Demers' job to open these investigations. He was the police chief for the Maine State Police, and instead he covered it all up because the police has been involved in Maine in child sex trafficking for a long time. November 2014, ex-Maine State Police chief pleads guilty to sexual assault, will serve 4 years. He's sentenced to 5 years in prison with 1 year suspended for sexually assaulting his own 4-year-old granddaughter.
Ugh. What a
Right, but
gruesome.
nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But that happened to happen in a jurisdiction where a sheriff who hates the Maine State Police was in charge, and the sheriff went after this former Maine State Police Chief Demers. But there's more than enough credible public evidence that the FBI and the Department of Justice Public Corruption Office should have opened an investigation. The minute that the Maine State Police Chief was sentenced to 4 years in prison for raping his own 4-year-old granddaughter, every single case that he covered up during his 26 years as a Maine State Police Chief should have been opened and investigated by the feds.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or also the ACLU Maine should have probably come in, right?
Oh, please. The ACLU. You know how many ACLU directors have been arrested for child pornography? I mean, the ACLU has done absolutely nothing. I've contacted them many times about Maine. I've contacted ACLU Maine office. If you just Google ACLU sentenced child pornography, you'll see the head of the Virginia ACLU was sentenced on child pornography charges just a while ago. I mean, ACLU is a worthless organization.
I'm not going to refute that statement. So what happened when you were working with Senator Mitchell that made you realize that he wasn't the person you thought he was when you started interning?
No, it wasn't when I was interning. I was far too young and naive. I was, 19, 20 years old. He was my hero. I was always so proud to be this girl from Maine, where we had these amazing politicians. I had gone to meet Margaret Chase Smith when she was still alive, when I was in high school. If you remember, she had stood up to McCarthy. She was famous. So, the narrative I had been fed as a child, my parents had been heavily involved in Democratic Party politics. I'd met Jimmy Carter's aunt as a child in Farmington, Maine. The narrative I was fed is that Maine politicians were the paradigm of integrity and courage, and they were willing to speak out against human rights violations. And I was raised in this proud tradition. I even ran for Congress. I ran in an open Democratic primary in my home District 2 in 2001 in Maine. I came in absolutely last, but even then, I still believed that Maine was this amazing state. However, that congressional run gave me some insight into how corrupt Maine was, because the chair of the Democratic Party at that time called me up and threatened me and told me I wasn't supposed to speak out about the other candidates' pro-gun, pro-life records, because we were all Democrats and I was going to be silent about that.
Isn't that awful?
Yeah, I said, well, you know what? This is America, freedom of speech. This is the whole point. I'm running an issues campaign. I doubt I'll win. I have very little chance because I don't have the money. I don't have the unions behind me. I don't have the name recognition. So I'm going to talk about his record. That's why I'm in this, and it's America. So you can threaten me all you want. But so the Democratic Party is deeply, deeply corrupt, and a lot of, elite privileged progressive women in the Democratic Party have been covering up for the men who have been raping and sexually abusing children for decades, and it's pretty widely known. And if you speak out about those progressive liberal men, then even the women will ostracize you. It's sort of, we're all good in the Democratic Party, and that's very far from the truth.
Yeah, I don't like our patriarchy bots. I think there are a lot of patriarchy bots out there. There's the women who do the work of the patriarchy while pretending that they are liberal or pretending that they are pro-woman, and they're actually accomplices to harm against women
the whole
and children.
women's rights community in D.C. has done nothing to help me and has turned against me for daring to speak out. I mean, there's this kind of groupthink, delusional groupthink in the progressive liberal circles that I'm familiar with, that if men say they're progressive, then they must not be also child rapists, and they must be good men, and they're not.
I used to think that. I used to think that way. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Tulsi Democrat. I really, really like what she's saying, much to the chagrin of my girlfriend, because she has put out some anti-gay statements in the past, and I think she was pro-gay conversion therapy when she was younger, which is not cool. But that being said, I still have respect for her integrity. But I see what's happening with her, where she's being silenced, and she's being kept out of the loop and not promoted as widely as the other Democrat candidates, and it bothers me.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree with you.
I used to think like that. I'm a Democrat. Our guys are great guys. They're great guys. And now I've been sexually assaulted by a Democrat politician in Rhode Island, and I can't get local media coverage, even though I'm SAG-AFTRA. I've had my own show in Vegas. I had 2 residencies in Las Vegas. I've toured the world. I'm not a celebrity. I'm far from such. But This is kind of an interesting story, I would imagine, for the women who live in Warwick and vote for Richard Corley. They should know what he's all about. He was supervising my custodial visits when he sexually assaulted me, and hence I could not see my child for over a year after that assault. And I can't get any coverage about this situation.
I know. First, I'm very sorry, and as you know, because we've spoken about this, the same thing happened to me in the state of Maine, and I haven't been able to get one journalist in the state of Maine interested in covering this. My daughter was confirmed for rape by the Maine Sexual Assault Forensic Examiner.
Oh my gosh.
Of the state of Maine. Raped by her father at the age of 2.
Oh my gosh.
Her father was on a temporary green card, and he was supposed to be deported for his crimes, which included domestic violence against me and her, fraud, shoplifting, lying to the U.S. government. He is still here. He's a complete criminal, and everybody in Maine protected him instead of me with a PhD. I used to be a college professor. It's very easy, Lisa, to destroy a woman in America because the misogyny and the patriarchy, they come after you. And a key element of the misogyny and the patriarchy, I'm learning, they think that it's their right to rape children. And if you stand up and you say, you're not going to rape my child, and I'm going to speak out, and you're not going to destroy me, I'm not going to be silent about this, they will go after you really hard. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about, since we got onto this, Nash Holt, who I've been devastated since Mother's Day this year because she committed suicide on Mother's Day. She was my friend. I'd just been on the phone with her for an hour a few days before she committed suicide. I had no idea that that's what she was going to do. But Forbes magazine did a whole series of articles about her case. A really great journalist named Tara Hawley. Anyone can Google it. I mean, she had twins. The father was sexually abusing the boys, raping, anal rape, and she had lots of documented medical evidence. Yeah, they put her on supervised visits, gave him sole custody, and then they went after her job, like they went after my job, and then they went after her finances and set her child support at a rate that she was put into poverty, like they did to me, and she couldn't cope. She lost custody in August, and she killed herself in May. So a lot of women do not survive, and I think it's really important that we say her name, because what's been devastating for me is that since she took her own life on Mother's Day, there hasn't been one lead article. She had Kennedy's office in Massachusetts helping her. They have done nothing. They've said nothing since she killed herself. Forbes magazine hasn't. Nobody's run an article talking about what was done to her. And she was basically killed by the system. So.
Well, I'm really sorry. I want to say how sorry I am that what's going on with your daughter. That's really painful, I would imagine. And I'm sorry that this woman, whom you knew on a personal level, also was taken by her grief that way.
Yes.
And knowing that her sons were being harmed so severely and still left with the guy who was raping them. Like,
yep.
That's not supposed to happen.
No. What I wish, there's all this, optimism with Me Too and Time's Up, but what has been left out is what's happening to mothers and children in family court. I mean, if somebody put their hand on my knee in a business meeting down at the World Bank, I'd more likely get coverage than when I say my 2-year-old was confirmed for rape and she's been taken and her life and my life has been destroyed. Nobody wants to cover that, Mm-hmm. It's easier to cover somebody put their hand on your knee, and isn't that horrible? So we really need some serious policy change in that we need the Federal Bureau of Investigations to have a unit dedicated to investigating the public corruption and the racketeering crimes that are happening in family courts across the country, because judges and lawyers and prosecutors and police are ganging up against mothers and trafficking children through family courts. It's pretty much a known thing that if a vulnerable child comes up in a divorce case and it's known that the father is abusing physically and sexually the children, that he's going to get custody. And what happens often is that these fathers share these kids around with other pedophiles. So I can't believe that we haven't got any mainstream media coverage.
Are they involved? Do you think the local media is involved, or just protecting the politicians? Because politicians
I do
are...
think.
Hmm?
I I think it's both. I mean, like all of these things, you got people who know and do nothing because they protect themselves and their careers and their family. And then you've got the people who are involved. So I think it's both. I mean, certainly in Maine, the journalists know about. I called the head of the Boston Globe Spotlight unit. You remember when the movie came out, Spotlight, about sex abuse in the Catholic Church in Boston?
Yeah. They got an Oscar for that, right? The filmmakers?
Exactly. Right. So I got really excited. And the head of the Spotlight unit for the Boston Globe had been a journalist in Maine and grew up in Maine. And I called him. And he actually picked up the phone. And I said, listen, this is great. What you guys have got this movie. You got all these awards. Can you please report on this in Maine? And the first thing he said to me was, yeah, there have been public rumors about that in Maine for a long time, that there's a government-run child sex trafficking ring in Maine. That's kind of common knowledge. So I was really excited because it's the first serious mainstream journalist that I've talked to who just straight out said that to me. And I'm paraphrasing. That wasn't his exact words, but more or less that's what he said. And so I thought, great, so you're going to cover it. And he's like, well, I don't know. We'll think about it. And I followed up, and I followed up, and I called, and I emailed the Boston Globe, and I tweeted at all those journalists, and they never, ever, ever did a story. I got one email back saying they were busy with other stories. So I don't know how you have the head of the Spotlight at the Boston Globe, who grew up in Maine and was a Maine journalist, tell me, yeah, we know that government employees in Maine have been involved in child sex trafficking. That's been, kind of an open secret, but then they don't report on it. So what I'm excited about, or potentially, is yesterday just some of the Epstein files were unsealed, just a small amount, and George Mitchell's name came up, and he's now being accused of being involved in child rape and trafficking with Epstein. But I woke up this morning and I see that Epstein has allegedly committed suicide in jail. So I'm wondering where this is going to go now.
They have his black book, right? Don't they have Epstein's black book? And they've got all these victims who've come forward now, and maybe more will also continue to come forward. So it seems like they have a lot to go on should they choose to keep investigating.
Well, now that he's dead, all criminal charges are completely vacated. So civil suits can still go forward for his estate. But, this is the reason that witnesses are often killed. Now, I don't know if he committed suicide or if he was murdered, and lots of people are speculating. It's all over Twitter this morning. But this is why people go missing.
Yeah.
This is why people are killed. This is why witnesses are intimidated, because the criminal charges can't go forward. However, the people that have been named, criminal charges could be brought against George Mitchell, for example. Mm-hmm. Bill Richardson, former governor from New Mexico, and Bill Clinton's UN ambassador was also named as being involved. Now, of course, they've put it, both Mitchell and Richardson have put out statements denying this, of course. But, this is huge news because in Maine, George Mitchell is a giant. And I go on, I type in Maine news on Twitter to see if anybody's even talking about this. And what's trending are puffins in Maine and lobster rolls and ducks walking across the road. And there was like one or two things about Mitchell and one journalist saying Mitchell's denied all charges. That's it. That's what the journalists in Maine did. Not one journalist has written, oh my God, we've all known about this. Let's dig in. Let's open an investigation,
That's messed up. Well, maybe someone will find some integrity and make that happen. We don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic.
Well, we need the feds, really, because Maine is such a closed-loop state. It's cut off with the rest of America. It has the smallest border with America. It's a very large state. It's a very poor state. And it's a very small group of people and families who have controlled the state for decades, and it's mainly been the Democratic Party. It's mainly been a one-party state. And you have zero oversight and accountability, as in, zero. And the media are just lapdogs. They're basically entertainment reporters, and there's zero investigative journalism going on in the state of Maine. So we need feds, we need federal investigations, we need federal media coverage, national media coverage, and, maybe we'll get that.
Well, when you say racketeering, you say that there's racketeering going on with these situations, with these child sex trafficking rings. What does that mean, racketeering?
Well, so racketeering is originally a crime that was used to describe what the mafia does, right? So, but it's basically just a description. It's called RICO, crimes for short, and each law enforcement has their own jurisdiction, and racketeering RICO crimes come under the FBI's jurisdiction. So it's not under Homeland. They have a different jurisdiction, right? Treasury, police do with money and money laundering. So racketeering basically is organized crime. Organized crime is you have to have more than one person, so two or more people plot to commit a crime. So they've organized to commit a crime. So it's not a crime that you've committed, a crime of passion or a crime of negligence that one person did, right, or an accidental manslaughter or something like this. This is when two or three people get together and say, hey, let's violate all of the laws, let's obstruct justice, let's harass and witness tamper, and let's commit this crime to enrich ourselves. So that's what's happening in the family courts, and certainly in Maine, which I can speak to the best. So what happens is there's a small group of lawyers in Maine. They all know each other, and they all help each other. And they get together, and basically when divorce cases come through the courts, if there are children that are vulnerable in that their fathers are abusing them, it's known their fathers are sexually abusing them, if there are any kind of allegations, basically the kids are going to go with the father, and I believe that's because the father's sharing them with the judges and the prosecutors and the lawyers and the police. So they all get together and do this. Racketeering, for example, when Senator Bill Cohen's name came up in the late 80s, early 90s, and children accused him, very poor children in Bangor, of molesting them. Racketeering would have been when the police chief shut down the investigation. I happen to know one of the state police officers who was involved. They had one meeting to investigate Senator Bill Cohen and the allegations that he was raping children, and it was completely shut down. So that's racketeering, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking, how can people do this? I don't understand it. Like, I got my issues, right? I got things I could work on to be a better human being, and I've made mistakes in this life. But I can't see raping a kid. I just don't see, if you know that a child's being harmed, how you would turn a blind eye to that or actually keep it going.
Right. Well, if you read my book, I describe Epidemic America's Trade in Child Rape. You can buy it on Amazon. There's a Kindle version and a paper. This is what I've really dug into, because when this happened to me and my daughter, and they stripped me of everything, I had two $500,000 homes on the Maine coast. I was a professor at American University. They took everything from me. I had savings, retirement. I had my daughter's college funding, and I'm living in poverty now. But I thought, they can't take my brain and my PhD. I'm a social scientist. I know how to do research. This is what I do. If this is happening to me and my daughter, it's got to be happening to a lot of other mothers and children.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lori Handerhan. Y'all, please do find Lori Handerhan online, y'all. She has a website. You can also find her on Twitter, Dr. Lori Handerhan. And find me at lisalandry.com. You can sign up there for my YouTube channel. You'll know when each new podcast drops every Womanist Wednesday. Podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Libsyn, and Google Play. Shout out, Ari Bear. I love you. I haven't been to Maine in a very long time. I took you there once when you were a baby because I had a gig there, and Kim came with us, actually, and she babysat you while I told my jokes. That was a long time ago. I don't think we're going to go back there anytime soon, son.